Hello Duelists! It is no secret that my favorite feature match from the 150th YCS in Columbus was our round 6 match with Arian Murphy and his Yang Zing deck. Now, there have been some pretty successful Yang Zing strategies in the national championships and regionals over the past couple weeks, but Arian Murphy's was a little different from all the rest of them. His used more of the Zephyr monsters from Cross Souls and went a bit lighter on trap cards than the previously successful decks. But I did want to show you all an example of what those other decks might look like, since I don't think there's enough synchro summoning going on right now. And as you all know, if you've read any of my articles, I am a big fan of synchro monsters. So Yang Zing is a deck that uses the new worm type monsters. They started out in Duelist Alliance, and they're a little different from the dragons that you already know of. So Yang Zing monsters, the basic ones, all special summon another Yang Zing monster when they are destroyed and sent to the graveyard. Each one has the ability, each of the non-tuners has the ability to let you synchro summon on your opponent's turn, using the Yang Zing monsters you control. And each of the non-tuners, the basic non-tuners, the Zephyr are a little different, but the basic non-tuners all grant a special bonus to the monster they use to summon it. So for example, Swanny here, he's level 4, 1900 attack, and the bonus he gives your synchro monster is plus 500 attack and defense. So I play 3 of him, as he is the strongest in terms of attack points, and I really like the buff that he gives to synchro monsters. The other one that I play 3 of is Bixie. Bixie's level 2, 2000 defense, and the bonus it grants is immunity to trap effects to your synchro monster. This is particularly important because not only does it protect you from your opponent's trap effects, it protects you from your own. And as we'll get to later, I have a lot of trap effects that could cause problems for our own monsters if we don't have the protection of Bixie. Next up, one Puleo, the Wind of the Yang Zing. This is for spell effects. It's particularly useful if you can get it on Yazi, the level 7 synchro monster that already can't be targeted, because then the only things that are really going to take him out are being banished by Trishula, or flipped down by Book of Eclipse, or just blown away by Regeki and Darkhole. Bian is sort of middle importance. I like its attack points, and its effect to make a synchro monster invulnerable to battle is particularly useful in one instance that we'll go over later. Finally, one copy of Tauti. Tauti's bonus is that he stops your synchro monster from changing possession, which means that it can't be taken by mind control, it can't be absorbed by Silent Honor Arc, etc. Anything that would let your opponent get a hold of your monster won't work. It also has 2200 attack points, which means you can crash it into El Shadal Winda and then continue your special summons. This version of the deck, it uses Lose One Turn, the new Cross Souls trap, which negates the effects of monsters that are special summoned. So unfortunately, Zephyraxi is not particularly useful in this variant. Zephyr Inu is, though, because of its level 6 and its 2600 defense points. Once this monster hits the field, it's likely going to stay there. Your opponent doesn't want to destroy it, because if they do, you get to search a Yang Zing card from your deck, but by leaving it there, they leave themselves open to letting you summon a 2-material Baxia, the level 8 synchro. And you can do that because you also have Jiao-Tu here. Jiao-Tu is level 2, 2000 defense, a lot like Bixie, but it has a special ability that makes it a card that you always want to see. If it's the only monster on your field, you can discard 2 Yang Zing cards from your hand, and special summon 2 Yang Zing monsters from your deck. One with 0 attack, one with 0 defense, and they're banished in the end phase. Ways to use this: the most common is to summon Bixie and Swanny. That gets you 8 levels for your synchro summon, and the monster you summon will have both plus 500 attack and defense, and be immune to traps. We'll see what we're going to put that on later on. But it can also be used in a combo with Zephyr Inu, and then another monster. For example, the other tuner, Chiwen. That'll get you a level 8 with 2 materials, and you'll have another tuner that you can also destroy for other purposes. Chiwen, level 1 tuner, no attack or defense points, but it can summon any of your other monsters when it's destroyed in attack position or defense position. Normally the 0 defense monsters summon monsters in defense position, 0 attack monsters summon them in attack position. This has 0 attack and defense, so it can do both. And you can also special summon it back from the graveyard when one of your other Yang Zing monsters is destroyed and sent to the graveyard. Only one of those effects can be used in each turn, however. And finally, I've got a copy of Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit in there. It's a level 3 tuner, which is useful, but I'm using it more for its ability to destroy cards with activated effects. For example, Cliffort Scout. Clifforts are back as of late, and Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit is a very good card against them, and I don't have enough space in this deck to play Mystical Space Typhoons. So I want an all-in-one card that can handle a lot of different situations and do a lot of different things, regardless of matchup, so I went with Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. That's it for the main deck monsters. Spell cards. 3 Yang Zing Path. Yang Zing Path is essentially a smaller Pot of Avarice. Pot of Avarice shuffled 5 monsters back into your deck to draw 2 cards. This targets 3 Yang Zing monsters in your graveyard and shuffles those 3 into the deck to let you draw 2 cards. It's very useful, and it's also a Yang Zing card. So even if you draw too many copies of it in your opening hand, you can discard one of them to help you play Jiaotu's effect, and then use the other to shuffle back in the monsters that you used. 2 Darkhole. Darkhole is essentially Raigeki in this deck, because all of your Yang Zing monsters that are destroyed will just special summon another monster from the deck when they go down. That means that the only person left without monsters is your opponent. And even if your opponent doesn't have any monsters, you can theoretically use Darkhole to sculpt your own field, to either get a field of attackers out, or the right synchro materials you need to synchro summon a really powerful monster with really powerful buffs. And of course I'm going to play real Raigeki as well, because there is no reason not to. My last spell is a copy of Book of Moon. Book of Moon is really useful here because Necroz of Unicorn is so prevalent, and if you can make your opponent discard their Trishula to keep Unicorn face up on the field, that is highly preferable to having it face up on the field. So I mean, it's a win-win either way. It can also turn down monsters that are powered by the Jin, and it can flip your own Jiaotu face down if your opponent were to target with Effect Veil or Fiendish Chain or something like that. That does it for spells. Finally, traps. There are a lot of traps in this deck. I believe 16. Starts with 3 Yang Zing Creation. Yang Zing Creation is sort of an extra Yang Zing summoning effect. Each of your monsters, when they're destroyed, summons another Yang Zing. Yang Zing Creation, when any of your monsters is destroyed, also summons a Yang Zing. You get to choose the battle position, and this effect stacks up. It's not an only one per turn thing, so if you have more copies of this on the field, you can use all of them at the same time when one of your monsters is destroyed. I mentioned on the stream that any game where you resolve this card, you're probably going to win, and that's basically true. It's not that much of an exaggeration. Next up, 3 lose 1 turn. This is a big hit from Crossfolds. It's almost single-handedly revived Clifforts, but it's also extremely useful here because you can use Bixie to make your synchro monsters ignore it. It also completely messes with the Necroz strategy, which is the main thing you have to deal with, and can also mess up Shaddolls as well. Lose 1 turn it has a continuous effect that negates the effect of special summon monsters during the turn that they are special summoned, and that only works while they're special summon monsters. If they stop existing at all, the effect will stop, and if they stop having effects because they're face down, etc., it will also stop negating them. So you can use Book of Moon to protect your own monster, or your opponent might do it as well. You do have to watch out for that, because Book of Eclipse does see a lot of play. More importantly, it has a triggered effect that happens when a monster is special summoned in attack position that turns it to defense. And that is part of why having 3 copies of Swanee here is so important. Because you can just normal summon this with 1900 attack, and most of the monsters your opponent will be special summoning don't have that much defense, just being able to normal summon a monster in attack position can let you dominate the field. Next up is Mistake. One of the reasons that Shadows were so popular is because they were a deck that doesn't actually need to search ever. But this is another deck that doesn't have to search at all. So you can use Mistake to shut down Clifford Scout, basically the entire Necroz deck, etc. This is definitely a card you want to see in your opening hand as much as possible. You only have one search effect in here that actually adds cards to your hand, and that's Zephyr Inu. But your opponent is never going to voluntarily destroy Zephyr Inu because they don't want you to get Creation or Path. 3 Fiendish Chain, the combination of blocking attacks and negating effects is just as good here as it is everywhere else, especially when you can stack it up with Lose a Turn. If your opponent destroys Lose 1 turn and you have a Fiendish Chain as backup, you're still golden. 2 Imperial Iron Wall. I debated the number of these that I was actually going to put in the deck for a while, but Imperial Iron Wall, the thing that finally won me over was seeing how many people were actually playing with Ritual Beasts. Imperial Iron Wall prevents all cards from being banished from anywhere at all. So in addition to blocking Necroz ritual spell effects to search for more, and blocking the mirror from banishing things, and also blocking Trishula from doing its thing, it also stops Ritual Beasts from fusing for any of their monsters or using any of their effects. For example, you can't use Apelio's attack increasing effect. Petalfin can't use its effect to bounce a card that would otherwise get Imperial Iron Wall off the field. This is a very strong card. I'd probably play 3rd in my side deck, depending on what I was expecting to see. This is another card you want to see a lot. The other thing that you might not realize is that it advances your own strategy as well because of Chi-1. When you use that ability of Chi-1 to bring it out of the graveyard, it's normally banished when it leaves the field. But if Imperial Iron Wall is in play, it'll just go back to the graveyard. That's an effect that was, if you remember Quillbolt Hedgehog, from the very first starter deck after Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D's released, there was a combo deck that used Quillbolt Hedgehog and Imperial Iron Wall to prevent it from being banished, and then summoned it over and over and over again in the same turn. Finally, we've got Torrential Tribute, which is essentially the same thing as Darkhold, except you can sneakily play it on your opponent's turn. And Ring of Destruction. Targeted destruction of cards that can really mess you up, like Necroz of Unicorn, or anything summoned with a Djinn, before your opponent can get Trishula into their hand is extremely important. It's also good for knocking out large Clifforts so that you can attack directly and basically take advantage of the lack of a monster. They often summon a bunch of monsters but then tribute them all for Clifford Stealth. If you can put enough cards down where they can't clear every one of your cards out and then hit the one monster they do have with Ring of Destruction, you can quite possibly, conceivably, swing back and beat them on your own turn. So that does it for the main deck. And if you've seen our other video on Teller Knights, you'll know that my stance is that you can't win on traps alone. You actually have to have monsters to back it up. And the normal summon ones, they're okay, but the real meat of the Yang Zing deck is in your extra deck. It's all the Synchro monsters you have. They tend to be incredibly powerful. Now, I spoke multiple times about why you want to be able to make a level 8 monster that is immune to traps and has plus 500 attack and defense. Baxia is why. Baxia, when it is Synchro summoned, looks at the number of different attributes of Yang Zing monsters that you use, well, of worm-type monsters. If you have other worms, like a Night Dragolich, you can use that as well. But it looks at the number of different attributes, then you target cards on the field up to the number of different attributes you used, and you shuffle all of those cards back into the deck. Shuffling stuff back into the deck is probably the most final way to get them off the field possible. You are not going to be able to get those cards back particularly easily, pretty much regardless of what they are, and I guess Necroz has the easiest shot at it, but it's still not very easy because they have limited search effects, can't use them all in a single turn. So having this monster come out at 2800 attack, while you have your own lose 1 turn on the field that it's not affected by, and knocking out your opponent's entire field at once, is amazing and will practically win you the game on its own. But that's not all it does. You can also target one card you control and a level 4 or lower monster in your graveyard, destroy the first, special summon the second. So, in our combo before where we had Jiaotu with Zephyr Inu and another Yang Zing monster, we synchro summoned Baxia using the first two, knock 2 cards off our opponent's field, then use the other effect to destroy the remaining card and revive a monster from the graveyard. This in effect gets us 2 more monsters, the one from the graveyard, and then one that is summoned by our other monster's effect. Baxia is extremely important. If you want to play 3, go ahead and do that. I'm always looking for somewhere to put a third one in my extra deck. Next up is Yazi. Yazi was from New Challengers originally. Burning Abyss decks hate this guy, because he can't be targeted by card effects. He also has an effect similar to Scrap Dragon, where you destroy one of your Yang Zing monsters and one card your opponent controls. And if Yazi himself is destroyed, you get to special summon any worm from your deck in defense position. This is a good way to get Zephyr Inu out, if you need it. Or, just to put a blocker into the way. And the last Yang Zing synchro monster is Qiaofeng, the Phantom of the Yang Zing, from Cross Souls. I'll leave it as an exercise to the viewer to count up all the different ways that you can summon this level 9 synchro monster with different attributes, because attributes are the name of the game with this one as well. For all of the different original attributes of Yang Zing monsters you use to summon this, your opponent cannot activate the monster effects of any monster that shares one of those attributes. It's a very strong lockdown card. If you could get, say, light, dark, and water on it, that would be pretty good. Although in that case it would also come with wind, so it might be a little challenging. Qiwen, Puleo, Bixi, Tauti would do it. But it also has the ability to let you search more worm monsters from your deck and put them in your hand. And also to... Wait, it's got another ability? Oh yeah, it does. When this card is destroyed, you get to add a tuner monster to your deck, and when your opponent's monsters are destroyed, you get to search things with the same attribute as the monster that was destroyed. I always forget about the tuner effect, but it just goes to show that you get your money's worth out of those 9 stars worth of monsters. Alright, now the regular monsters. Underworld Fighter Balmung is a level 4 synchro monster that doesn't really see a whole lot of play, but it's a great fit with Bian's effect to make your monster immune to battle, because its ability is that when it's destroyed by a card effect and sent to the graveyard, you can revive a level 4 or lower monster in your graveyard, other than this one. Also really good with Bian's battle immunity ability is Herald of the Arclight. You normally only see this in Necroz's extra decks to be sent to the graveyard with Kaleidoscope, but it's really easy to summon in this deck, and you'll be able to use both its effect to banish monsters that are sent from the hand or main deck to the graveyard, and also the ability to negate the activation of a card, or of a spell, trap, or monster effect by tributing it. Once you summon this card once, you can keep reviving it over and over again with Baxia to use its effect again and again, so you don't necessarily need more than one. Though I know a lot of people like to play 2 of it, and that is a perfectly okay decision. Speaking of cards I do play 2 of, Armades, Keeper of Boundaries. Clocking at level 5, it's really easy to make this card with Suani to bring it up to 2800 attack. If it's attacking, or is being attacked, your opponent can't play cards or effects until the end of the damage step. This is great for getting around anything that will stop your battling, like the effect of Necroz of Valkyris, but it's also useful for games 2 and 3 because almost everyone is going to side in Fire Hand and Ice Hand against you. Fire Hand will disrupt your Yang Zing effects because destroying them will not be the last thing to have happened when that effect resolves. And they'll also use Ice Hand against your traps because you play so many of them. So if you can put out Armades and just run over all the hands with them, those effects can't activate at all. So that's why I run 2. Once they destroy the first one, being able to pop out a second one and keep on the offensive is very strong. Also got Ally of Justice Catastor. Catastor automatically destroys any non-dark monster it battles. It's pretty obvious why that's good. Level 6, there's Vulcan the Divine. Legendary Collection 5Ds was the first chance for a lot of people to get this since it started its life as a promo card. But it targets face-up card you control, face-up card your opponent controls, returns both to the hand when it's synchro summoned. It can target itself, so you can keep bouncing it back to your extra deck to use over and over again, so you only need one. Goyo Guardian is gargantuan, 2800 attack to start. If you can put a Swanny on it, it's 33. And it can basically beat anything your opponent summons, but also can steal it, put it in defense mode on your side of the field. Level 7, Cross Soul's Clearwing Synchro Dragon. Two different abilities, one that protects level 5 and higher monsters from being targeted by monster effects, and the other negates the effects that activate of a level 5 and higher monster. Either way, if it destroys a card like that, it'll gain that monster's attack points till the end of the turn. And if you watch our round 6 match from Columbus, you'll see Clearwing Synchro Dragon activate its effect numerous times to disrupt El Shadal construct. One other level 8, Scrap Dragon. Scrap Dragon's effect is very useful here. It destroys a card you control and a card your opponent controls at the same time, so you can trigger your own Yang Zing effects while also destroying any card your opponent controls. Sometimes you need a more measured and slower response to your opponent's plays because they don't put enough cards on the field at once to sweep away for a big win with Baxia, and in that case, Scrap Dragon is very useful. Level 10, Leo, Keeper of the Sacred Tree, can't be targeted except during your main phase 2. And finally, Star Eater. Star Eater is a card that you can summon. It must be synchro summoned, can't revive it any other way, but when you synchro summon it, its summon cannot be negated. So if you suspect your opponent has Solemn Warning, this is the card to summon. And it's also unaffected by your opponent's card effects while attacking. So it's another way to get past Fire Hand, get past Valkyrus, that sort of thing. That does it for the extra deck. As for side deck, I'm pretty sure that there are a lot of future opponents of mine that are watching this video as we speak. So my side deck will remain a secret. However, I do have a few suggestions on how you could modify a deck like this to your own liking. One is to just change up the ratios of your Yang Zing monsters based on what you think you're going to play against. If your opponents play a lot of battle-based decks, you might want a third BN. Or if you just want to attack more under your own lose a turn. If there are more spell-based decks, you might need another Puleo. Or you might need more tuners and use more Chiwen. If you don't want to use lose a turn, then you'll be able to add Nothling the Starlight to your extra deck from Premium Gold 2, so that you can finish off the deck, or finish off your opponent, basically with the Gaga Cowboy 800 damage effect. I already mentioned that a lot of people like more copies of Baxia or Herald of Arclight. Also totally valid. Jiaotu is a dark tuner, so you could even play Biels of the Diabolic Dragons from the original Premium Gold, who is indestructible. Maybe you want to switch up your tuner selection a bit. Well, there's always the Fraxi. My version of the deck doesn't play it, but Arian Murphy's does. He had a lot of success with it. I think you might have a lot of success with it too. It can turn any of your Yang Zing monsters into a tuner, which allows for a lot of different ability and synchro monster combinations. You might also want to play more copies of Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, especially if there are a lot of Cliff Forts in your locals or regionals, and you need more ways to destroy them, but you're not really down with playing Mystical Space Typhoon. Also, if you play Zaphraxi, you can get the third effect of Menephis Horus from Secrets of Eternity that lets you steal one of your opponent's monsters. Another tuner choice would be Masked Chameleon. If you have no level 5 or higher monsters, you can normal summon Masked Chameleon and revive a monster from your graveyard with 0 defense. That's really great with Swanny because it lets you get a plus 500 attack and defense level 8 monster, including a slightly less good than usual Baxia, but still pretty good. This would be my preferred method for summoning Scrap Dragon, I think. You could also try adding a different sort of tuner monster. Warrior tuner monsters and reinforcement of the army give you another interesting direction to take the deck. Junk Synchron can revive Bixie, the level 2 monster that protects your monsters from traps. Combine the two, and you can easily summon Armades or Catastor, immune to traps over and over again, or you could summon a level 4 like Baomeng immune to spells. TG Striker is a level 2 tuner that you can special summon from your hand, if you control no monsters, and Reinforcement of the Army can be used to search both of these cards out in an instant. Speaking of searching, if you're going the Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit route, why not try Emergency Teleport? You don't always need to use Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit for its effect. You can also make use of the fact that it's a level 3 Psychic type tuner. You can also just flat out add more special summoning to the deck. Mathematician can send cards like Glow Up Bulb or your other Yang Zing to the graveyard so you can revive them later. And if you go for the revival route, cards like Call of the Haunted, Oasis of Dragon Souls, and even powerful Rebirth from Cross Souls can be used to get those monsters right back for Synchro summons. And finally, if you just want to add more special summons, there's always Soul Charge. I tend to be a little more cautious with my life points when I play with Yang Zing because sometimes you just have to crash a 0 attack monster into one of your opponent's monsters just to get the right combination of levels and abilities on the field. So once you get more of a feel for how the strategy works, you might consider Soul Charge. And there's also 1 for 1. There are a lot of monsters in the deck, but one of the most important ones is Chi-Wen, and being able to summon it straight out of the deck is pretty good. You can also summon Puleo if you need it, and you can play 1 for 1 even if you already have a monster on the field, which you can't do with a lot of special summoning cards. And if you don't think that there are enough traps, finally there is Rivalry of Warlords. Rivalry makes it so that only one monster type can exist on either field, on each field at the same time. Basically all of your monsters are worms, and nearly all of your best Synchro monsters are also worms, whereas a lot of opposing decks play a lot of different monster types, so limiting them to only one monster on the field can be extremely valuable. And that'll about wrap it up. Yang Zing is definitely one of my favorite strategies, probably because it makes use of my favorite type of extra deck monster, and I hope that a lot of you out there will give it a shot and enjoy it too. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, subscribe on YouTube, and give us an ad on Twitter at Yu-Gi-Oh_TCG. And thanks a lot.